Quiet on set. Speed. And action.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart.
You know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
What's in the bar?
Houston, we have a problem.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, I would shoot you crazy.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Mailer. On today's episode, John H. Foote counts down the 15 greatest supporting actress performances in cinematic history. This is part 3 of our 4-part series. Please check out episodes 1 and 2, where we did Best Leading Actor and Actress. It's going to be a good one. Take your seats and grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, we are the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is any film you haven't seen is a new experience. You guys know the routine. We're going to get the big man on the phone. So without further ado, please welcome John H. Foote.
So, continuing our series on the greatest performances in cinema, we're going to talk about supporting actress performances today. Once again, John, you've narrowed it down to 15, but I figured I'd let you have the opportunity to give some honorable mentions should the mood strike you.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Anna Paquin in the piano was a wonderful performance from a 11-year-old girl who did most of the talking for her mother, played by Holly Hunter in the movie. And she won the Academy Award, kind of surprisingly. She was nominated. No one really thought she'd win. Everybody thought Rosie Perez was going to win that year for Fearless. And Paquin was a surprise choice, but I think a very good one. I think it's probably the best performance by a young girl since Patty Duke in The Miracle Worker, and that's my other runner-up. She played Helen Keller, who was deaf, dumb, and blind at birth and learned how to communicate through the teachings of Annie Sullivan. And Patty Duke was extraordinary. The two of them won Academy Awards, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress. But this was Patty Duke's movie. Her performance was absolutely astonishing. And the breakthrough moment when they finally learn how to talk to each other, when she realizes that she's a person, and so is Annie Sullivan, is as moving as it was back in 1962.
All right, anything else, or is just those two?
Just those two.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to start off at number 15 with an actress I think nobody dislikes, Marisa Tomei in The Wrestler.
Marisa Tomei won an Oscar back in 1992 for My Cousin Vinny. And the knock against her was that Jack Palance had read the wrong name. And what a cruel thing to say, because she was hysterical in My Cousin Vinny, opposite Joe Pesci. She walked away with the movie, and stealing a movie from Joe Pesci is no easy thing to do, but she did. Years later, she gets a second nomination for In the Bedroom, and for this film in 2008, she got a third nomination. And I thought she was spectacular as the young stripper that Mickey Rourke's Ram has a thing for. And she helps him. She helps him shop for his daughter. She makes suggestions about how to get close to the girl again, and is slowly falling for him when he makes the decision to wrestle again after a massive heart attack. And she goes to that bout, and you realize there could be something between them, but he doesn't see it. He can't see it at all, and he goes back in the ring, and you know he's going to die. That's going to be the final fight he ever has. But Tomei sunk right into the character. All the nude scenes of her are her. And Mickey Rourke made a crack when he won the Independent Spirit Award. Thank you, Marisa, for taking off your clothes. Well, kind of crass to say, but she looks amazing. She's 44 years old when she made the film. She looked 24 and gave the performance with as much depth and soul as anything I'd ever seen. It was just a brilliant piece of acting. And she should have won a second Oscar for this.
Yeah, that's a great movie, and she really is great in it. And she's sort of a timeless beauty. I mean, she's just as gorgeous now as she's ever been. And I remember being thrilled when she was announced as Spider-Man's new Aunt May in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and seeing her opposite Tom Holland with this really long hair and these old granny glasses and all this stuff. And I just laughed to myself. It's like these filmmakers are trying so hard to make Marisa Tomei look unattractive, and it's just an exercise in futility.
It's not possible. And I've interviewed her. I've sat across the room from her twice. And you can't quite believe how beautiful she is in person. And she's lovely. She's a wonderful person, which is not always the case, but she really is.
Coming in at number 14, we're going all the way back to 1939 with Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, she played Mammy in the film. And I mean, now it's fashionable to knock that because she plays a black maid during a time of slavery. And they say that she caters to the white folks. Well, it's accurate. It's historically accurate, for God's sakes. And Hattie McDaniel's performance came at a time when black actors and actresses were relegated to small parts of a butler or a maid. She was very fortunate to be handed a plum role, Mammy, who was a key character in the film, in Gone with the Wind. She knows Scarlett O'Hara. She knows her like the back of her hand. She knows she's a conniving, vicious bitch who will do anything to get ahead. But she also knows Rhett Butler, and she knows that they're right for each other, that they love each other. And even after Bonnie dies, that beautiful child that they have together, she does her best to try to get them back together because she knows they're good together. She knows they make sense. I think it's a wonderful performance. And, you know, a lot of people say it's a caricature. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not at all. If you walked into a history book back to the plantations around the time of the Civil War, you would see somebody like Mammy. Hattie McDaniel said she based the character on her grandmother, who was a maid during the time of the Civil War. So, I mean, how can it be not accurate? She became the first black actor to win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. But she wasn't even allowed into the ceremony. She had to sit in the lobby and come in when she'd won the award.
Wow. All right, coming in at number 13, we have Estelle Parsons and Bonnie and Clyde.
A lot of people watch this film and they get annoyed with Estelle Parsons because she does a lot of times screaming. She plays Blanche Barrow, who's married to Clyde Barrow's brother Buck, played by Gene Hackman. And she's a preacher's daughter. She's never lived a life of crime. And she doesn't want to. She's kind of pulled into this, and all of a sudden guns are blazing, and she's hysterical. She's screaming all the time. And when her husband gets shot, half his head gets blown off. And she sees that. She's watching that. I think one of the great comedic moments comes when they rob a bank and she wants her cut because she was equally at risk as well. And, you know, Bonnie, played by Faye Dunaway, is not happy with that at all. She didn't wield a gun. She didn't do anything, but she was there and she wants a cut. She risked her life too. She won the Oscar for her performance, and a lot of people kind of cried foul, saying, really, all she does is scream. But to maintain that hysteria through a 60-day shoot must have been a brutal type of performance to give. And I think she's terrific in the film. I think she deserved that Academy Award and should have been nominated for a second one a few years later in a film called I Never Sang for My Father.
Coming in at number 12, more recent performance, Viola Davis in Fences.
Yeah, this was a powerhouse piece of acting, and they wisely campaigned her for Best Supporting Actress because they didn't think she could win the Best Actress category. I disagree. I think she could have won Best Actress for this. She's phenomenal in the film. Everybody talks about the best part being that of the husband, played by Denzel Washington. And sure enough, it's a powerhouse role. And Washington gave it everything he had. But Davis is the heart and the soul of the film. She's married to a man who fathers a child by another woman. And she raises that child when the mother dies in childbirth, and raises it because it's the right thing to do and because it's her husband's child. And you can see the pain on her face throughout and what she goes through and the hurt and the wounds he inflicts on this woman. And yet she stays with him. She loves him. She can't help it. She loves him. And even after he dies, her sons want to boycott the funeral and she won't allow it. No, you're going to go and you're going to honor him because he was your father and he put food on the table. It's a gigantic piece of acting. And I don't think there would have been any other votes for supporting actress. I bet it was unanimous.
She seems sort of incapable of giving a bad performance, Viola Davis.
She's just so honest. She's completely honest in anything she does. She was great a few years ago in a film called The Help. And a lot of people thought she'd win the Oscar for that. She didn't. They gave it to Meryl Streep for one of Streep's lesser performances, The Iron Lady. And I wouldn't have been troubled at all had Viola Davis won Best Actress for The Help.
Coming in at number 11, we have Eve Marie Saint in On the Waterfront.
This is a big, big production, an Elia Kazan film about corruption on the docks of New Jersey and New York, and is most famous probably for Marlon Brando's performance as Terry Malloy, which we talked about a few episodes ago. It's renowned as a guy's film, but in the middle of it is Eve Marie Saint, who gives this wonderful performance as Evie, who is the sister of the man who Terry inadvertently lured to his death. And over the course of the film, Brando and Evie fall in love and realize that they're pawns in a bigger plot with Johnny Friendly, the mob boss. And it's about Terry finding his moral compass through Evie, who's a nun, and leaves the nunnery to be with this man. And death is around them at every corner. They're very nearly killed many times, but they save each other. And it's a great sequence at the end of the film where she watches him beat Johnny Friendly to a pulp and then climb up the boardwalk to go back to work. And it's very powerful. This was her first film. She'd never acted in a movie before. All her work was on stage, and she knocked it out of the park. She was terrific.
Coming in at number 10, we have Virginia Madsen in a film I know you really love, Sideways.
Yeah, I saw Sideways at the 2004 Toronto Film Festival and loved every minute of it. I love Paul Giamatti. I love Tom Church Hayden, Sandra Oh, and Virginia Madsen. She and Paul Giamatti have a scene on her back deck where they talk about wine. And you realize they're talking about themselves. And he talks about a Pinot needing special care as he does, needing to be understood as he does. And then she talks about the science of wine, how it gets better as it gets older, which she certainly is doing. And it's just terrific to listen to them talk in metaphors. And they have such a lovely chemistry together. And Paul Giamatti is not a terribly good-looking guy, but there's a great connection between them. They're both old souls. And Virginia Madsen plays an old soul better than anyone I know in movies right now. She is terrific. And she should have won the Academy Award for this performance. She did win the New York Film Critics Award for Supporting Actress and the National Society for Supporting Actress. I had hoped this would really kick her career into high gear. But unfortunately, as often happens, it didn't.
Coming in at number 9, no surprise, she makes an appearance on our list. We have Meryl Streep in Adaptation.
Yeah, this is her funniest performance. She plays a writer who has written a book called The Orchid Thief. And it's being adapted into a screenplay by two twin brothers, both played by Nick Cage. And she goes down to Florida to research the orchid and meets an orchid expert played by a toothless Chris Cooper. And they fall in love. And he is the least likely guy Meryl Streep would ever be with. And you can't quite believe that they're together, but they are. He introduces her to a flower that when you inhale it has an effect 10 times what marijuana does. And watching Meryl Streep stoned try to talk on the phone was a thing of beauty. It was hilarious. And she gives by far the funniest performance of her career, but also quite tragic towards the end when her lover's torn apart by an alligator. It's quite shocking, comes out of nowhere. The whole movie is beautifully acted. Nicolas Cage is terrific as the two twin brothers. I mean, he was up for an Academy Award, as was Streep, and Chris Cooper won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And Chris Cooper, when he accepted, said, "Thank you to Meryl Streep. It was like great jazz working with you." And that sums up working with Meryl Streep.
I think she was really funny as Julia Child as well.
She was, and she was accurate as Julia Child. The beauty of her in Julia versus Julie was that I remember Julia Child. I used to watch it at my grandmother's house on television, and she was hysterical. She would drop stuff. She'd drop a spoon. She'd drop a souffle. She'd drop a cake, and she'd just carry on. You know, that crazy voice, that ooh, and on she went. And Meryl Streep nailed that. I mean, she didn't so much play Julia Child as she inhabited her soul. And I couldn't believe they gave her the Oscar for Margaret Thatcher. instead of Julia Child, because she was incredible in that movie.
Yeah, that's one of those Oscars she definitely deserved, but didn't get. And I think when they gave it to her for the Iron Lady, it was one of those situations where they got together and they're like, we can't continue to not give it to Meryl Streep just because she's won so many times.
Well, it had been a generation since she'd won the award, 29 years since she'd won Best Actress. And she's the most nominated actor in the history of the Academy. 22 nominations she's got. And you're right, they kept nominating her and not letting her win. She should have won, if truth be told, she should have won for Out of Africa, A Cry in the Dark. She could have won for The Bridges of Madison County. She should have won for Adaptation. She should have been nominated at least for The Manchurian Candidate, and could have won back-to-back for Doubt and Julia versus Julia, instead of finally winning for The Iron Lady.
Coming in at number 8, we have Lesley Ann Warren and Victor Victoria.
Alan and I touched briefly on this the other night when we were talking about Victor Victoria. She plays a brassy, vulgar, smoking hot blonde who is just a walking sex machine. You swear to God her backside is on ball bearings when she walks across a room. And just an oversexed, hyperactive nightmare who, when she realizes her boyfriend, played by James Garner, has the hots for Julie Andrews, who we think is a man, she's pissed. And her temper is like a fury unleashed. She's got a great song about Chicago that's got to be seen to be believed. Her bedroom antics are hysterical. And her temper, my God, when she loses her temper, he runs. He's a tough mafia guy, but he runs away from her because she's crazy. And a wonderful performance. I haven't laughed out loud in a movie for a long, long time. But I watched Victor Victoria about a month ago, and she still makes me laugh out loud. She's wonderful.
Right on, heading down the list, we're coming in at number 7 for Olivia de Havilland in Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, as much as Hattie McDaniel deserves the Academy Award for Mammy, Olivia de Havilland gave a better performance as Melanie, the long-suffering cousin of Scarlett O'Hara, who truly loves her cousin, truly believes in her, understands her hardship, and wants her just to have a happy life. She's completely blind to the fact Scarlett loves her husband, throws herself at Ashley Wilkes every chance she gets, and Melanie will not have a bad word said about Scarlett. The woman is a saint, and it's such a beautiful, soulful performance from this woman who's so fragile. She dies in childbirth, and Ashley falls apart when he dies. So he's loved her all along, and when Scarlett sees that, she can't quite believe it. And it's a beautiful piece of acting from Olivia de Havilland. Gone with the Wind is full of great, great performances, and especially from the women. I mean, 3 women we've talked about: Vivien Leigh, Olivia de Havilland, and Hattie McDaniel. And there's probably 3 more we could talk about, but the list is what it is.
Moving on down, coming in at number 6, we have Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver.
Jodie Foster is a career actor. She's been acting since she was a year old. And here, Martin Scorsese approached her after seeing her in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, at which he worked with her. He saw the final cut and he said, I've got to work with this kid again. He cast her as Iris, a 12-year-old prostitute, in his film Taxi Driver. And she is miraculous. She's street smart, she's savvy, she's sexually aware. The scenes where she and Robert De Niro are together and she starts unbuttoning his fly are alarming because they're so bloody realistic. And Foster is completely there in the character. She inhabits Iris in every single frame she's in. And she goes toe-to-toe with one of the best in the business at that time, De Niro, and never, ever looks out of place. And the horror of her when she's watching De Niro massacre all these men around her is stunning. I mean, she sees men with their brains blown out right in front of her, inches from her face. And Foster's reaction is perfection. She's terrified. We get it. And if that didn't scare the shit out of her to go all the way back to Minnesota, I don't know what would. She won all the Critics Awards for Supporting Actress, the New York, the National Society, the LA, was nominated for an Oscar and lost to Beatrice Straight in Network. A great performance, but I don't think better than Jodie Foster's.
part of a long tradition of brilliant female performances in Martin Scorsese films.
True, and from Jodie Foster. I mean, she won an Oscar for The Accused. She won another one for Silence of the Lambs. She was nominated for Nell. She could have been nominated and won again for Contact. I mean, the lady is a marvel of acting. She's just a very gifted, brilliant woman.
Coming in at number 5, we have Angelica Huston in Prizzi's Honor.
Yeah, this is a really imperious, powerful piece of acting. She plays the wronged daughter of a mafia don, and she's been betrayed by Jack Nicholson's Charlie Partana, who was going to marry her. She cheated on him, and yet she's the one that's the victim, and she plays the victim to her father and puts Charlie in a horrible position. She's masterminding the whole thing. She's like a Black Widow spider who is standing by like a puppeteer, moving all these pieces into play because she wants back with Charlie Partana, the Nicholson character, and she gets it. And she plays everybody off everybody brilliantly, absolutely perfectly. Angelica Huston had been around a long time. 1969, she made her first movie with her father and never really caught on as an actress through the 70s. She was busy. She was always working, but she never seemed to get that part that was going to take her to the next level. And she finally did. Her father, John Huston, cast her as May Rose Prizzi in this film, and she was extraordinary. Nicholson said when the movie was over, she's the movie. She's going to win all the awards, and she did, including a well-deserved Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress.
Coming in at number 4, a brilliant performance in one of my favorite movies of all time, Margaret Hamilton in The Wizard of Oz.
You know, the first time I saw Margaret Hamilton in The Wizard of Oz, I was 4 years old. And when her face came into that hourglass and she started laughing at Dorothy, I ran out of the room, went down and hid under my bed. I was scared shitless. And to this day, when I watch The Wizard of Oz, she is absolutely terrifying. She's the stuff of nightmares. I mean, that woman has probably caused more nightmares than any other person in the movies. She was a character actress at MGM, just a working stiff. She came in, she went to work, she went home. She was cast in The Wizard of Oz, and it was the most iconic role of her career. And she is that movie. Without her, they don't have a movie. Every movie's as good as their bad guy. Well, she is bloody terrifying. And it's a kid that she's terrorizing. She's going to kill Dorothy because of a pair of ruby slippers. She's going to kill a little dog. She orders the flying monkeys to tear the scarecrow apart, and they do. I mean, she is one nasty chick. And then she's finally melted. Dorothy throws water on her, and she melts. And Hamilton was not nominated for the Academy Award. She should have been. She should have been for bravery because she was very, very badly burned in the sequence where the fire explodes in Munchkinland and she leaves. It burned part of her face and most of her hair. And yet she was back to work a couple days later, carrying on. Absolutely deserved an Oscar nomination. Had she been nominated, I'd give it to her.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And my first reaction to the Wicked Witch of the West as a kid is not dissimilar to yours. Very, very frightening.
Oh, I was scared. And I remember I was 4 years old. And that's 56 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I ran out of the living room and was under the bed in a heartbeat.
Also, just a fantastic film in general. One of the greatest ever made, if you ask me.
I agree completely. A marvelous movie.
I got to play the Cowardly Lion when I was in 7th grade, and it's a role I've been dying to revisit as an adult because it's so much fun and the whole story is.
It's just a fun show. I directed a version of The Wizard of Oz years ago, and it was really hard not to have the movie in my head the whole time. But the actors were terrific. They made each character their own, which really helped me. But it was a fun show. I would still rather watch the movie every time. When I was in rehab at St. John's, it was on Easter Sunday, and I'm watching it, bawling like a baby. And one of my nurses came in and she said, "John, what's wrong?" And I looked at her and she sat down on my bed and I said, "I'm Dorothy. Don't you see? I'm Dorothy. I just want to go home."
Yeah.
She sat and watched the rest of the movie with me. I felt like a total schmuck.
Oh, well, no, that's a sweet story. I was part in my elementary school when we did the show. We had so many kids who came out to audition. We had 3 full casts and three
That's
different,
amazing.
yeah, 3 different casts did it. So I was one of 3 lions, and being all of like 11 years old, I had no idea what acting was. And so I, unlike the other 2 kids who did their own thing, I just straight up did an imitation of Bert Lahr from the movie. And I think that's a character where it's kind of justified because he's so silly and over the top. But anyways, that's a subject for another conversation. Coming in at number 3, we have Linda Hunt in The Year of Living Dangerously.
And what puts Linda Hunt on the list? Most people don't even know who Linda Hunt is. She's on a TV show right now. I think it's called NCIS, and she's been on there for years. She plays the head of a kind of an intelligence organization. She's a tiny lady. She's less than 4 feet 10 tall. And in The Year of Living Dangerously, she plays a man. She plays Billy Kwan, who's a photographer, a war photographer during unrest in Thailand. And she is magnificent. I remember arguing with a school teacher who didn't believe she was a woman. He said, "Oh, no, that's a guy. They found a guy." And I said, "No, that's a woman. Her name's Linda Hunt." And back and forth. And finally, somebody else came into the room and agreed with me and shut him down. And he was a good friend of mine. He was a good teacher, but he was dead wrong. That's the impact she had. Everybody thought it was a guy, and it was not. It was Linda Hunt. And she won the Academy Award for it. She won every award imaginable in 1983. It's one of the most acclaimed, remarkable performances ever given. And sadly, she's never, ever been given a chance to shine like that again. I mean, granted, that's a once-in-a-lifetime role. But she's good. She needs to work. She should be working and doing more substantial work than this. I think she had a small part in Popeye in 1980, which, Jesus.
That reminds me, we definitely got to do a show on Robin Williams sometime.
Yes, we do. We do.
Coming in at number 2, we have Monique in Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. This is a fucking tough movie to watch.
It is. I saw it at TIFF in 2009, and I was stunned by her performance. This is a woman from hell. It's a woman who's been beaten up by the system, chewed up and spit out by the men in her life. She has no self-worth, and she takes out all her hatred for life on her daughter, Precious, an overweight girl who is bringing home another baby. There's one scene in the movie where she tosses a newborn infant across the room, and you can't believe she's done it. In another, she drops a television from the top of the stairs on her daughter, narrowly missing her. She's a monster, and Monique plays her with no apology. She just goes for it. She's got a great scene at the end of the movie with Mariah Carey, who's unrecognizable as a counselor, where she justifies her treatment of Precious. And it's horrifying to listen to, just horrifying. Yeah. And Monique was magnificent, absolutely magnificent. I wish she'd act more, because I think she's a born actress. And to have the courage to play this part and then to play it as she did was absolutely remarkable.
All right, so here we are, coming in at number 1. The greatest supporting actress performance in cinematic history is chosen by John H. Foote, Dianne Wiest in Bullets Over Broadway.
She's magnificent in this. She won her 2nd Academy Award for Woody Allen in Bullets Over Broadway. She plays Helen St. Clair, a Broadway legend who is past her prime and knows it, and will manipulate, will lie, will cheat, will screw the director over to make her part bigger, more substantial, and better. She's hard drinking. When she goes to a bar, she orders 2 martinis. Her friend orders one, and she said, "Oh, you're having one too." When she starts to seduce the director, John Cusack, she'll say to him, "Don't speak, don't speak." And the "don't speak" becomes a running gag all through the movie. Whenever she says it, you know she's manipulating him. She's hysterical. It's a grand dame performance. I think she should have been in the Best Actress category, and she would have won that hands down too. She's one of the greatest character actresses in movies, who has been good so many times. I've lost count personally, and I think it's the best supporting actress performance I've ever seen.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 18 in the can. The 15 greatest supporting actress performances of all time. As mentioned, this is part 3 of a 4-part series we're doing on lead actor, actress, and then supporting actor and actress. Part 4 is coming up where we do the men in the supporting category. Check us out on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and especially our YouTube channel for this, all past and future episodes of the podcast. Hit like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for listening. Lots more cool episodes coming up. Till next time, we'll see you guys at the movies.